All right. Good afternoon, magandang hapon, maayong buntag sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon, practitioners. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you all for joining us. And this is our webinar, second webinar of the installment of our webinar series for AMRPP, or Association of Maintenance and Reliability Practitioners of the Philippines. So nakita ninyo that we had a video, a short video, just showing ano ba yung naging journey natin, how we came about to this association. So we are duly registered organization by SEC. This is the first association on asset management, maintenance, reliability engineering, asset integrity, and equipment maintenance for the Philippines practitioners. So regardless of your background, engineering discipline or whatnot, as long as you are a practitioner, you are welcome. Okay, so I know we gave the others some time to join us. So I just like to do a shout out, a roll call of our participants. So we have good afternoon, Al Christian Parungao.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Arnel Altiche.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Billy Joe Marcelo. There's Billy.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Billy. We also have De La China.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. We also have Edwin Heredia.
Mayong hapon sa tanan.
Mayong hapon, sir. We also have Ellie Portugal. Good afternoon, Ellie. We also have, of course, our Board of Directors and Board of Trustees. We have Hener Magadia, our speaker for today. Hener.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Hener. We also have Jason Mendoza.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. And also Mark David Ke.
Hello, everyone. Afternoon.
All right. So everyone, good afternoon. My name is Vince Bernal, and I'll be your, should I say, host for this second installment of our webinar. I will not anymore prolong our wait, and I would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to join me in our... Okay. Thank you, everyone. I also would like to take this opportunity to welcome those who just joined in. Okay, so welcome to our second installment of webinar series for the Association of Maintenance and Reliability Practitioners of the Philippines. As mentioned, this is a duly registered organization with the following vision and mission: to be the premier organization for asset management, asset maintenance, equipment reliability, and asset integrity in the Philippines. Our mission is to promote and advance the application of knowledge in asset management, asset maintenance, equipment reliability, and asset integrity in the Philippines. We also would like to develop and promote best practices in asset management, asset maintenance, equipment reliability, and asset integrity. It's also our mission to contribute to the country's economic competitiveness through advocacy and partnership with stakeholders to influence Philippine laws, policies, and codes of practice. So, dear practitioners, I invite each and one of you to join us in this mission to achieve our vision. Together with the Board of Trustees who are present here with us and officers, we would like to invite you to take an active role in our invitation to be part of the organization as a member, as well as to volunteer in our different committees, which I will be discussing later on. Okay? All right. So let's get into our topic for today. Our webinar for today is about how high reliability organizations make it to the top. Okay? This webinar examines the transformative journey of organizations grappling with poor reliability, showcasing the steps they take to achieve best-in-class performance and turn around their fortunes. By exploring the fundamental business practices that characterize high reliability organizations, participants will gain insights into the principles that underpin the consistent excellence. This includes the 4 core components that drive reliability: management structure, reliability processes, best practice programs, and data and analytics. The session also delves into how these organizations value quality talent by investing accordingly in their reliability team, emphasizing the skills they prize the most, and how they retain the best and the brightest when hired. Also discussed are the pitfalls of investing in Industrial 4.0 solutions that often fail to yield the anticipated advantages. Attendees will emerge equipped with a fundamental understanding of the dynamics that differentiate high reliability organizations in their quest for excellence. So, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker for today's webinar is Engineer Hener Magadia. He is a certified maintenance and reliability professional with more than 30 years experience in the maintenance and reliability improvement initiatives in various chemical industries. He has been an instrumentation and controls engineer, automation engineer, and a maintenance and reliability professional. He is currently the Senior Reliability Manager for JG Summit Olefins Corporation, overseeing the daily activities of reliability engineering, condition monitoring, and asset integrity teams of the maintenance division. He has extensive experience on the various aspects of process instrumentation and automation, project engineering, and the implementation of maintenance, process, and plant reliability investment projects. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Engineer Hener Magadia for our webinar today. Sir Hener?
Okay. I'll just be sharing my screen.
While Sir Hener is sharing his screen, I would like to remind everyone that we can type in our questions on the chat. Okay, and if there's no questions, you can also click your raise hand button. Okay.
Okay. Again, good afternoon, everyone. I thank you for attending this webinar. Can everybody see my screen right now and can hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Sir, we can hear you, sir.
Okay. Okay, so again, the topic for today is about high reliability organizations make it to the top. So what basically was discussed during the introduction by Erwin. So So basically, this will be all discussed during this webinar. So first of all, many organizations currently are in the throes of economic downturn, are having a very poor performance financially. So it is very important that the organization itself can be a source of a good return on investment for the company. So here is the market survivor model. The horizontal axis is the market share, and then the vertical is the unit cost, meaning dollars per unit of product being produced. So it could be dollars per metric tons and the likes. The blue two lines, the two blue lines, the top is basically the market price. So as you can see here from this graph, company A is basically having the most market share. Okay, and they are also the lowest unit cost producer. So the lines that you will see here identified by your future is basically the profit that they can actually get based on the cost when you took the cost that was used to produce the product. So that ability to operate at the lower cost, this will be a good enabler for company A to survive, and they can even flourish as even if the market price fluctuates. Now, company B, although they cost more compared to A and has lesser market share, this company probably has already implemented some improvement changes and is already experiencing the benefits. Now, company C, as you can see here, is what we call a poor reliability company. So it has the least market share. It's very high production cost. It's preventing it from competing on price and expanding their market share. So they're a very good candidate to not survive at all and may close down in the near future. So if they do not make any changes to how they operate, then they might really end up closing. So what does company A has that the others doesn't have? So if you are a company C, like company C, so you have to come up with changes to how you operate. Meaning, how can you reduce the cost of production without sacrificing the quality of your product? So one of those drivers is basically your reliability and maintenance performance. So the graphics that's shown here, this comes from basically a benchmark report from a benchmarking company, a leading benchmarking company, Solomon Associates. So basically, this shows you the difference of how much a Haram performance contributes to the overall profitability, business success, and competitive advantages of a company. So the difference between a quarter one and versus a quartile four company is huge. So in this example, it's around 7% difference. So the best performer here is the Q1, and Q4 is the poorest. So in this example, the client here looks like they are Q3. So if the company can have as much as $100 million a year, this already translate, the difference already translates to around $7 million in difference. So the goal of any successful business strategy is to create the long-term profitability and consistently making a profit. But this will require your reliable assets and personnel. Now, a reliability-focused strategy, basically, you need to increase your mechanical availability. So what does it mean? So less failure. Your assets are always available when needed to run, and they can deliver quality product at the design capacity or even better. The strategy should also reduce unplanned events, meaning as much as possible, all maintenance is planned. Okay, sudden failures are not acceptable, since when you don't plan for something, it ends up costing you more. So unplanned events are really a big issue. Then also you reduce the mechanical spend. So this is basically the cost of maintenance. There must be a way for you to control your cost. How do you manage and optimize it? So reliability and maintenance performance is the major differentiator for organizations, so that they can consistently meet their commitments. So what is a world-class reliability effectiveness index? So this is one measure that Solomon Associates provides when they're doing benchmarking. So a world-class reliability can be achieved by managing the company's primary cost drivers. So we have basically two in this case. So one is the cost related to mechanical availability, and the other one is basically your maintenance cost. So improving the mechanical reliability requires that you reduce the production losses attributable to reliability and maintenance costs. So this includes your annualized turnaround and short overhauls. Basically, these are the planned maintenance events. And then you have the unscheduled outage and equivalent process rate reductions. These are related to the unplanned events. So when we say equivalent process rate reduction, these are rate reductions due to equipment suddenly having functional failures, and then they cannot deliver anymore the design rate. Now for the optimized maintenance cost, so the total maintenance cost, this will involve your direct maintenance cost, which includes your routine labor and material cost, and your annualized turnaround labor and material cost, and also the indirect. So basically, this is the management cost, insurance, payments, and others. So this is basically what the organizations need to focus on. How do we improve mechanical availability and optimize the maintenance cost? So a company that would like to go and become one of the industry leaders normally goes through a journey. We call it the journey to best in class. And this journey normally starts with a determination of what actually is your current state. So normally, the improvements could take months or even years. So this is one problem when we are introducing improvements to a company. So management normally doesn't realize or didn't expect that some of the results of such improvements may take years to implement. So some of the quick wins could get you some value by months, but most of them will take years. So that wherein you can see the benefit. Now, some of the initiatives would also need third-party expertise to implement. So normally you get consultancy services. This is basically due to the fact that not all the best practice knowledge is available in your organization. So that's why we get consultants to engage and work with us. Now, the best overall performers are not actually the lowest spends. So I will just make it clear that spending and actual cost is two different things. So what when I refer to spending is when you try to reduce the spending, meaning you don't want to hire new people, you don't want to invest. So basically, that is what is meant here by the lowest spenders. And what they do in the particular graph, as you can see, if the organization tries to go from the current status wherein they are in a low mechanical availability and high cost, and try to move to the quartile where there are the industry leaders, you cannot sustain such an initiative if you try to go from your current position to a position of low maintenance spend or low cost, and then low mechanical availability. And then from that position, try to move to the position of industry leaders. It just will not work. So what actually needs to be done is that you have to maintain some sort of spending, and that is basically the investment that you will make. And then from there, you move to the high mechanical availability and low cost when these improvement projects benefit kicks in. Now, the reliability improvement cycle has the following requirements. So what you did first is that the current performance should be established from a metric, meaning we need to have metrics in place, and then those metrics will tell us what our current performance is. Then from the same metrics, we will then see potential performance improvements, if there is. And then the financial implication of the gap, meaning if you find a gap, how much is that financial implication, or how much is that affecting the company? So normally gaps can go as high as in the millions of dollars, and so you already see that any improvement, even a percentage, can give a lot of returns for the company. So here is the reliability improvement cycle. So from the first step, we first establish the metrics and definition. So basically, we identify what are our metrics, identify how do we calculate it. Basically, that's how you define the metrics. And then you establish the data sources. Where are this data coming from? Is it coming from the historians? Are they coming from SAP? And then from that data, we will then establish our current performance using our metrics. Then we compare the performance to industry best in order for us to understand the performance gaps. Yeah, because basically, the gaps, you cannot actually determine a gap if you don't compare it to somebody that is better than you. Okay, so, and from that understanding, when you know already your performance gaps, then you set targets for improvement, or basically how do we improve or close those gaps. And then we develop an action plan to implement. Basically, normally this is a master plan that could take several years. A reliability engineering team can come up with a number of initiatives at one time, and then put it on a schedule. And then finally, you monitor and sustain the improvement. Now, when you undertake this journey, you must have a clear understanding of where the company is. That's why we establish first the metrics to come up with the analysis and discovery of gaps. So this understanding will enable us to know what the significant overall business benefits are. We will also recognize the financial incentives, because mostly gaps measurement, especially if you are doing cost analysis, you already know how much the incentive will be when the gaps is closed. And then you have an understanding of where to focus and what to do. Now, where do companies start on this journey? So I can give you three starting points. So the first one is you do a plant availability and asset utilization analysis. So what is a plant availability? So it's availability of a plant asset to be in a state to perform the required functions under stated conditions for a particular time interval. Now, plant availability losses are lost opportunities to the organization. So basically, if your equipment went down due to a failure, so basically production stops, and you will know how much you lose for that particular period of time that the equipment is down. So those availability losses are what we call the loss opportunities. So a manufacturing organization needs to minimize the production losses. So for us to understand this, what we do is that we categorize these losses into various types, and then we do an asset utilization reporting. So I'll give you an example. So here is an example asset utilization report. You can see here two important points. First is the potential capacity. So this might be the rated capacity of a unit, or it could be what they have already proven maximum rate of their plant. Then you have the actual asset utilization. So basically, this is where this is the quality product that you were produced, that when you sell, you have a positive profit. So in this particular case, you can see that the asset utilization is only 68% of the expected capacity. The others become losses due to certain events that the company experienced during this particular period of run. So those losses, you can create categories. So for example, a category of inside battery limits, meaning all losses pertaining to the production side of the company. And then the outside battery limits are losses for the supporting side, utilities, your raw material deliveries, logistics, and then you have the market part, wherein the effect is actually coming from external of the organization. So in this particular example, some of the categories that were created, for example, are budget maintenance turnarounds. So basically, these are the planned maintenance. Then you have your equipment failures. Combining this, they have around 30 metric tons of losses due to this too. Then there is also this technology. So it could be your hardware, like DCS, or your software issue. Now, this asset utilization losses can also have further be, you can create more details in this side. So for example, for equipment failure, you can actually create more categories, like you can say it is for a rotating equipment, for an instrument or an electrical equipment, piping. So basically, you can create more details. So in reporting utilization losses, you can actually say that, yes, we have 30 metric tons lost due to equipment failure, and most of those, around 18 metric tons, are due to rotating equipment. So it's that type of details that you can actually create using this type of reporting. Now, once you have this data, for some time, you will actually see gaps. You can suddenly see the gaps in performance or operational performance by your organization. So, for example, it could be due to a product mix, meaning the product that you're producing is not really selling, or your technology that you implemented actually doesn't deliver the promised production rates. So once you discover, you establish those type of gaps, you can then start creating this, what we discussed earlier on the reliability improvement cycle. You can then say, okay, so I now know that I lost this much because of technology. We have a poor implementation of the project. How can we improve it? Okay, so those are what we mean when you establish the gaps by measuring your metrics. Now, the second type that you can actually use to identify your gaps is through benchmarking. So basically, this is comparative performance analysis. Normally, this is done by a third-party company who has an extensive history, proprietary database of operational performance of possibly thousands of companies. So they actually take data from companies where they do the benchmarking, and then using that data, they can then compare companies. Now, the comparison can be done by type of industries, meaning it could be chemicals, it could be then divided into what type of a chemical company it is. Is it a olefins manufacturing company, or is it a polymer company, polyethylene, or is it a polypropylene plant? Can you still hear me because of the rain?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
We can still hear you loud and clear.
It's okay. Okay, okay.
Malakas lang ang ulan, sir, no? Pero rinig po. Rinig ka
Okay.
namin, sir.
So normally, the companies undergo this benchmarking, and they normally use either Solomon Associates or the Philip Townsend Associates. So I think the most popular here is the Solomon Associates. Now, the comparative performance results is shown by Solomon in this case using bars, with each axis divided about an average performance like the one in the right side. Okay, so what you can see here is that what is being considered is the value of lost production and the total maintenance cost. As what we can see here, the difference between a quartile 1 and a quartile 4 is that the total maintenance cost is 4 times for a quartile 4, and the value of lost production is 5 times when compared to a quartile 1 company. So those differences are significant. And that is the reason why a quarter 1 can actually expand their market share, because their unit cost is lower, and then basically their profit is bigger. When your profit is bigger, you can invest more and try to improve further, which is not a luxury for a quartile 4 company. Now, why do you do a benchmarking? So benchmarking allows you to know where your strengths and opportunities are. So you determine the potential value on realistic performance improvements, since you know how much the gap is. Because the measurement here is cost, so you actually know how much your gap is compared to another company. So you already know the potential value if you will do an improvement initiative. Once it's successful, you basically get as much as what is stated in the gaps. Then you identify areas of focus where improvement efforts will bring the maximum benefit. Of course, you have those quick wins that you can initially do, but most of the high return items are the ones that will require more investments and time. Now, you also develop a sustainable strategy to close the identified performance gaps and improve reliability. You can set targets that will challenge the organization but still be achievable. And then you provide also justifications for capital investment and staffing plan. So basically, this is one of the benefits of knowing those gaps, because it will be easier for us to justify to management why we need these capital investments or additional people. Now, once a sustainable plan to close the performance gaps and improve operations is developed, impact to the organization performance includes, so you can achieve as much as 60% less downtime. You can spend 4 times less on maintenance due to lower downtimes, and also spending less hours on maintenance and emergency work. So this is through improvement of your reliability and maintenance performance. Now, the third way where you can start is through an reliability and maintenance maturity assessment. So mostly, actually you can do this internally, but you can also do this with a third-party consultant. This one is more specific in a way that it targets immediately some item in your reliability and maintenance system. So for example, you want to target to improve your maintenance work execution process. So basically, you do an assessment, find out what is the deficiencies or the performance gaps, and then implement whatever changes needs to be done. So this review, as I've said, can be done in collaboration with a consulting company. You can do it also internally, but then again, there is that limitation. Somebody in your organization should know what good or best practice looks like. Because if nobody knows, then whatever you do will give you nothing. Okay? So once the assessment is complete and the results are known to the team, then the focus should be on how we close the gaps and inefficiencies, and then develop a master plan that will bring the quickest return and most effective improvements. Now, the organization can then decide if they will benefit from external resources. So you know already what you have to do. Then you have to decide now, do we need to use external resources as well? We already use the consultant. Can we use them also to help us implement? So this is basically for implementing those improvement opportunities and then coaching and mentoring support for the team moving ahead. So again, we have to look at the knowledge of what is good and what is best practice in this case. So you can also do self-implementation based on the recommendations provided if the team feels comfortable doing it. So basically, you can also do it yourself. You just get from the consultant what needs to be done, and then you can actually do it yourself. Now, here's an example of a reliability and maintenance maturity assessment. So basically, you have a series of targeted assessments. So in this example, it is asset management. And then you have these elements where there are questions or audit questions that is being asked. And then you are actually graded on how well your organization stack up. So there are certain levels of the findings. So the first one is not engaged, while the number 5 is your best practice. So basically, if based on the questions asked, the company was able to prove that they have best practice in place already, then they get a 5. If not, then they can get something from 1 to 4. And based on the findings, this is then where, again, the gaps will be established, and then the initiatives will then be proposed. So once you have that done already, and you have these improvement initiatives in place, what does the high reliability organizations get right? So basically, you have 4 core practices that the high reliability organizations have. So basically, they have the management structure in place. They have reliability processes. And they have best practice programs, and also have a very good way of using data and analytics to help them improve their performance. So these core principles or practices, once in place in any organization, then there is that that sense that there will be continuous improvements. So for the management structure, as you can see here, so what this means is that you have established already the proper leadership in place. Under this leadership is a good organizational structure. I think for right now, what they said is the best is the agile organization, which is non-hierarchical. Okay, because hierarchical organizations normally has so many levels of authorities that makes decision making takes longer to get decisions in place. So it's basically an agile flat organization is right now one of the preferred structures. Then everyone in the organization already knows their roles and responsibilities. Okay. So, and they also have mission, vision alignment, and clear corporate reliability standards. So the organization is structured already. Accountability flows from the executive level and effectively delegated down. As I've said, there is a shared vision and purpose so that employees will feel personally invested in their work, knowing that they are serving a common purpose. There are also clear corporate reliability standards in place, and these are communicated well, including them in capability models and in the performance metrics that are being reported and tracked, normally on dashboards. So one of those dashboards could be the executive dashboard, so that people higher up know what's the current status and how they can actually push some activities and get it done. So the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined and well understood by everyone. So there's a clarity of role, basically. And they know that their role actually contributes to driving reliability. And then, of course, the reliability engineers are paid higher salaries, and there is emphasis on communication and coordination skills. So basically, that is what is expected of a reliability engineer. There are also well-defined career options and paths for career advancement. Now, for the reliability process, normally high reliability organizations, they implement robust reliability processes in their operations. So they already identified through risk management what assets in their operations are critical. Okay, it's very important at the beginning to already know which of your equipments are actually critical, because this decides which one gets priority in maintenance, in procurement, and other important aspects of operation performance. Now, the plant and equipment reliability strategies are created using RCM and FMEA principles, and these are regularly reviewed. So this is actually an annual activity of reliability engineering. Initially, when an equipment is first installed, they do RCM, and that is where they establish the strategies and all the failure management strategies that could include how do you address the spare parts requirements, are there procedures in place, are there trainings that are required for this particular equipment. So these strategies are executed through strict compliance to the preventive maintenance schedule. So also, asset health is monitored and regularly reported. So the results of inspections, like for example, a condition monitoring team, this one is regularly also reported to management and also to operations, especially to operations, so that they know of impending issues that might need an equipment to be turned over to maintenance. So defect elimination also is practiced. So for this defect elimination, so you this is basically like doing a fracas wherein you report the failures, do a root cause analysis in order to find the root cause of failures, and then do whatever is necessary to ensure that such failures doesn't occur again. So, and then reliability engineers determine the underlying issues and implementing the holistic and practical solutions. Now, reliability engineers also draw on a variety of tools and capabilities, and also information coming from subject matter experts. So the learnings from every reliability event is basically shared and used, in this case, to update equipment design standards. It could also affect your work processes. So you need to make adjustments to that. So basically, the learnings from these events needs to be shared with everyone in the organization. One good practice basically is once you do or complete a root cause investigation of a particular event, you should issue at least a one-page learning report that will be beneficial for the entire organization. They will have an idea of what actually caused the event, and ways that they can actually contribute to preventing it. So it's very important that these learnings are shared and basically used to further improve performance. And then robust systems are in place to manage, preserve, and disseminate and update the reliability knowledge. So you have this way of collecting these findings, and then using that for future reference to further enhance the way you deal with failures in the future. So that's the reliability process. Then we have the best practice programs. So we have the industry best practice reliability and maintenance programs, so that the optimal strategies are always deployed quickly and efficiently to all assets. Such programs could include your preventive and on-condition maintenance. You need to have a lubrication program, an inspection management program, spare parts management, operator care, engineering modifications, and employee development programs. So the best strategies are developed by the organization's best subject matter experts. So these programs deliver performance improvements through increased reliability and the reduction of failures, downtime and risk. And this lowers the operations cost. Ultimately, this will achieve in helping the organization meet their performance goals. So these strategies are deployed to all assets all the time and continue to evolve based on real data and an effective review process. So they can be easily updated, be customized for site variations, and redeployed with ease. Now, also regarding people, so engineers have well-defined development programs to give them ample opportunities for professional and personal development. So on the part of the management, there is a commitment to training the people. So this could be through a internal classroom. They could send the employee to industry-sponsored events. Then also they give them for that paid time off. And then also those on-the-job trainings. and other mentoring ways of extending or imparting that knowledge to the new employees. So basically, these programs, you will only know what is actually best practice uh, by learning it from someone who actually knows what best practice is. So normally, these are coming from consultants. Next, you have data and analytics. So the high reliability organizations has the correct maintenance management system in place. So they have this computerized maintenance management system, data analytics, and enterprise resource planning systems in place, or what we normally use is SAP. So these systems are structured in a way that makes it easy to track, plan, get actual data and KPIs with maintenance strategic objectives. So from this graphic, you can see that a data structure is important. So meaning if you have SAP, you need to have the equipment master in place, or what we call the asset register. All the equipment should be there. You should have a taxonomy system in place to identify functional locations, technical objects, and then the catalog profiles wherein you identify the failure codes, or meaning the damage and cost codes. Now, this is very important because this is how reliability comes up with the analysis. So organizations that do not have this will have a difficulty of finding out based on historical data what actually occurred and what caused the failure. So it's now very important that whenever a work order is closed, so your execution team should be identifying what is the identified root cause at that time, to make sure that this data can be used later on. This is being used to basically establish trends or a common thread for failures that are continuously occurring. So it will be a great help to reliability engineers to analyze failures. Now, tools for reliability, such as statistical reliability analysis, root cause analysis, and asset health performance data for all critical equipment are effectively used by the reliability engineers. So some examples of this includes the Meridium and the SAP Asset Strategy and Performance Management software. So this tools actually simplifies a lot of the analysis or analytical statistical analysis being done by the reliability engineers. So it's also very important that actually, I think most of the industry leaders have this type of performance management tools in place. So the data management and system database are well defined and integrated, and the database of reliability parameters are hierarchy aligned with asset register in SAP or CMMS. So basically, the reliability data should be in sync with your CMMS. Now, about this advanced technology to drive reliability improvements. So we know about Industry 4 currently. So you can hear a lot of noise claiming the miracles that can be provided by these new technologies. So you have the Internet of Things, machine learning, automation, cloud computing, advanced analytics, and detailed performance management solutions. So they claim to offer the powerful and game-changing ways that can help our organizations achieve new heights in operational performance. But again, there's a but here. Some of these businesses, or many actually, since they desire to be one of those industry leaders, so they start buying this technology solely. So it's basically their only solution to drive the operational improvement. So this one actually costs a lot of money. So aside from if you're doing some advanced diagnostics, aside from the computer system, the software, you also need sensors that you will put in your assets. And that is the way for these machines to learn and come up with this advanced analytics. Now, the problem is without the people or engineers who are trained in data analysis and in developing solutions, meaning they should also know what solutions to develop once they find what this technology actually is telling them. The benefits mostly turns out to be inflated. So it basically loses value. I have one experience before. So we bought this high value Bentley Nevada System 1. Basically, this measures the online vibrations systems of compressors. Now they bought it, but then nobody knows how to use it. So it sits there in the control room, always on screensaver mode, so that eventually people are calling it the ₱1 million screensaver. Basically a useless technology that was introduced. But there is the benefits there, actually, if the right people are using it. So that's the danger of immediately diving into, for companies diving into deploying these technologies without the proper systems or processes in place to support it. Now, what the successful companies actually focused on instead of this Industry 4 technologies is that they concentrate on the enablers, such as your rigorous processes, your effective programs, role clarity, and the accountability systems. In addition to this Industry 4 technology. So it's actually not bad, but it could be a very bad investment if deployed incorrectly. Okay. Now, how about for reliability engineers? So reliability engineers who are creative, diligent, dedicated, and determined are the main drivers of reliability excellence in any organization. So basically, they are the ones that ensure that the reliability practices are in place. They do the analysis of failures and come up with the improvement initiatives to address such deficiencies. Now, these high reliability organizations, they hire and develop the reliability to not only be technical experts, but also be able to solve problems, learn along the way, and make decisions quickly. Now, soft skills include problem-solving capabilities, teamwork, composure under pressure, written and verbal communication, and relationship building. So basically, what is very important here is the way he deals with people. One of the main functions of a reliability engineer, or one important factor for him to succeed, is his ability to communicate with people. Ano? Since you have to communicate with different people in different levels of the organization. So knowing how to solve problems and how to communicate. So basically up, down, meaning up meaning higher people, down people working in the field, and across meaning not only in your organization but the other departments as well. So that is one way for him to be successful in his work. So he needs the critical skill of earning the trust and support from these people in the organization. Now, how do these companies attract and retain the best people? So the industry leaders, of course, they can retain the best and the brightest engineers. They provide higher pay, and they have the best, they have performance-based compensation and bonuses. And they basically reward high performance, basing it on specific key performance indicators. So here is from a McKinsey and Company survey that was done for salaries of reliability engineers. So for the low production companies, so you have 78, the average $78,000, and then you have for HRO 87, and then for the high producing companies, it's 102,000 versus 112,000 for the HROs. So you can see here the difference on the pay that reliability are given, comparing the standard company versus the high reliability organizations. So they also have attractive paths for career advancement. So these are well defined. Normally, these are individual development plans. So this will give them ample opportunities for professional and personal development. So normally, paths for reliability engineers, from reliability engineering position, you can go to either a subject matter expert position, and then from there, maybe a global or corporate-wide reliability engineering subject matter expert. Now, what do these industry leaders look for in people? So, of course, the top in the list is the technical skills, then the ability to collaborate with other teams for superior results, leads and communicate effectively, deliver innovative solutions. He generates customer service and also demonstrates emotional intelligence. Basically, he knows how to deal with most people in the organization. Now, taking all of this in, why does 80% of improvement initiatives fail? So basically, this is not a number that I come up with. This is basically based on organizations, maintenance organizations, that normally after a couple of years come back to companies and then do a poll or a survey asking them questions about their performance. And what they found out is that 80% of improvement initiatives actually fail to deliver. Now, what actually are the pitfalls that prevent the success of such initiatives? So basically, it is how the change was managed. So what we call the management of change. So this includes the leadership, the structure, the culture, the talent of the people, and the level of buy-in from actually the stakeholders. So without this, your initiatives may fail. Now, everything will start with the leadership. So the CEO and board of directors are the main players here. Now, a common example of a failure is normally when the initiative comes from the bottom, going up. So meaning it's coming from the rank in the organization. They come up with proposals, and then top management said, okay, let's do this, but doesn't actually show the usual support that it needs. And then it fails. So normally, this type of initiatives have a small probability of success. Now, top-down initiatives, on the other hand, meaning coming from the top, going down, this one has the most chance of succeeding since it gets more attention, the structure, the funding, and also the scrutiny in various levels of the organization that will ensure that the deployment will be successful. So that is the difference. So that's why when you propose an initiative, make sure that you have an executive sponsor to back you up, and make sure that that is sponsor actually do his job of making sure that the initiative becomes a success. There are many times that you get a executive sponsor but doesn't really care what happens to the initiative eventually. Now, the right structure is vital for the effective deployment. So this should include your values along with the reliability policy. Now, the model for this structure for operating excellence should be based on what organizations like SMRP, and other models from third-party subject matter experts, again, using external or third-party consultants. So the structure should be in place. Again, otherwise, my example before, like nobody even cared to train the people who will be using the software. And then the buy-in of everyone is a must. So for any initiatives, if you didn't get everybody to be involved in the initiative, then the effective deployment will suffer. So this will require actually that the individuals becomes part of the team. They can either participate for the entire initiative or just a segment of the initiative, and that when they feel that they are actually owning the project, they have the tendency to even move the initiative further and faster, much better than even if the CEO that is sitting in your head office can actually contribute. So this feeling of ownership is actually what drives most improvement initiatives. Now, also, metrics are important. So we have what to say that initiatives that gets measured gets improved. So the leading and lagging metrics will both inform the senior management as to how the initiative is progressing and also connect with those on the production floor if they need a certain push or support from management. Now, the other factors that can doom a corporate reliability program are when you are focusing too much on the cost, meaning you still try to limit the impact of the initiative. Meaning, some companies, okay, the management backs an improvement initiative, and then when the amount was already determined, they then said, okay, let's do it in phases. You do this phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then, or they will then say, okay, why not we just get an expert, tell us what to do, and then we will do it ourselves. Now, the problem with those, sometimes those solutions, especially those that they want to do it themselves, basically to reduce the cost, is that those who will implement will not do a better job than a company that is actually experienced in doing such improvement initiatives. So eventually, the implementation will drag. They will say, we actually have less people to do it. We don't have the time. And eventually, the project will fail. So that's one issue when you focus on cost. Then there's also the problem of not having the right talent in place to lead and deploy. So also this forcing of one size fits all, meaning what is applicable to your plant A may not be applicable to your plant B. Their problem may be a new set of issues that has no relation to the solution that you implemented in plant A. So basically, it may not address what the problem of plant B actually is. And then not recognizing that a minimum of 2 years is needed to see improvement and forgetting to include operations and engineering groups as partners with maintenance in its deployment. Okay? So, I think that's it. Did I take too long?
Wow.
Did I take too long?
Very informative naman, sir. Okay naman. No, at least for me, it's really loaded. It's really loaded. And we would like to ask further kung may mga clarifications. And I'm happy that there's some direct messages I have received. So would just like to share with you, Hiner, some of the questions that were posted. And one of them, if I may just share my screen. Hold on. Okay. Those who have questions, by the way, can still type in your questions on the chat. Okay. Okay. All right. So thank you so much, Hiner, for those insights, no? From the reliability journey, even to the part of the leadership, no, role. So this is the first question that we have. Can you provide insights into the role of leadership within high reliability organizations? I think this question was already answered.
Yeah.
But putting it in the context, for example, ng Philippines, no? I noticed that cost is always being the driving force in terms of
Mm.
sustainability. So kung dadagdagan ko yung tanong na to, how do we make sure that we avoid yung fizzle out, yung mawawalan ba ng interest later on for support yung leadership as your program, is taking place? Kasi we know hindi naman to overnight, di ba, yung realization ng benefits. So what can we do, sir, do you think we can do to have the leadership, have the continuous support on our initiatives?
Well, basically is the problem there is actually I think this happens at the beginning of the formulation of the initiative. So basically how you presented to management, the initiative that you are going to do will help the bottom line, because mostly management, if it's not clear to them what your objective is, tends to because they're always looking at the bottom line. If you don't indicate to them how much, or that's why it's important you get the performance gaps in dollars or in money, or in the quantity, because that is what is important to them. So if the presentation, just you said, oh, we will improve this reliability performance, we will then have less downtime like this, but then not indicating actually how much will that be, and how much will that improvement improve my bottom line. So basically, I think it's coming from that initial presentation when you presented the project, and management just thinks that, okay, you want to improve reliability, okay, but okay, go ahead. But then actually, it would be better, and you will get more attention if you actually cite numbers. How much will it contribute to the company's finances?
Thank you, Henner, for that. I think really money talks, because after all, the business are there to create, money, right? To profit. There's another question about the benchmarking. It was really good on my part to see that Solomon Associate, this Philip Townsend Associates. A question was, after a benchmarking and the reliability engineering starts to implement improvements, when is the best time to do another assessment and check if you already moved from one quartile to another?
Well, actually, if you do an assessment, normally you come up with a master plan. A consultant normally will produce a master plan at the end of the assessment period. From that assessment plan, they have already laid out all the improvement initiatives that needs to be done, and then a timeline. So when that timeline, from that timeline, you will already know, did we get any benefit from here? Now, for example of a Solomon benchmarking, what we have is we plan to have a second benchmarking by after 5 years. So normally it is when we have our next turnaround maintenance, because part of the benchmarking involves turnaround numbers. So to better gauge improvements in your maintenance, it's better that you do it after every turnaround if you need to.
Okay, thank you, Henner. And the next question is, this is closer to home, no, for us as practitioners and members of AMRPP. Para sa mga companies that cannot afford to do a benchmark, because we know that it costs to have an international consultant to come in and do a benchmark or a reliability assessment, can AMRPP support such activity So I would like also to invite some insights from our incorporators and officers on this question. But on your end, Hiner, do you have any response to this?
Well, there are people like me who actually has experience doing this assessment, and also an idea of already what best practices are, since we have already taken the services of this type of consultants. So
So it's possible.
it's really it's possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. On my end, as the one of the incorporators and officers, ang nakikita ko kasi rito, we start with benchmark, diba? That's the whole point of AMRPP, which we get insights from all practitioners from different industries until we establish our own baseline, so to speak, diba? Kasi we know that the benchmark, at least correct me if I'm wrong, Henero, no? These benchmark are global. It can
Yeah.
be in particular industries like petrochem, oil and gas, pero global pa rin. If we try to
Yes.
scale it down to a more contextualized Philippine setting,
Yes.
you need the
They actually can do that.
no? Insights coming from you practitioners to give in your insights. And this is one of the initiatives that we would like to do in AMRPP, where we send out some surveys, some assessment tools that you need to fill out para as we collect them, meron tayong committee that will collect them and make sense of these data para we
Yeah.
can set our own baseline and benchmark among the Philippine settings. So that's just my idea on that. But I don't see any reason that this is not going to be available for practitioners initiated by AMRPP.
Actually, if you know the reliabilityweb.com, they have there this assessment like a survey. They question you what is your basically every aspect of the maintenance performance is there. So I think they collect that from different companies. So that's why they're getting the data. Mostly from also members that are working in the industry. So it's very easy for them to get those type of data because they have many members.
And I just want to add on to that because I as erudite, we do send out some surveys, no? Unfortunately, real talk, some of the participants or the intended respondents are not actively responding to the survey. So it would be hard for us to get these insights if we do not get participation on the other end, di ba? So
Yeah.
hopefully when AMRPP initiates yung mga ganitong survey, I would like to request that you take part, no, on this assessments, these insights. After all, these are free, just so we would know how we can see a benchmark, a baseline for everyone. Is there
Okay.
anyone else, Jason or Mark, from our BOT who would like to give insight on this question for AMRPP?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. So this is Jason. So for information of everyone, I was able to work with Sir Hiner as well during the assessment of Solomon on our plant. And yes, I believe it is possible that our organization, AMRPP, can support this type of activity. And I agree with Erwin as well when he says that we can start by doing a Philippine setting assessment. And that is definitely possible. I can support in my personal capacity on this activity as well as a representative also of AMRPP. So, yun lang, Erwin. I believe it is possible for number 3.
Thank you, sir. Mark, would you like to add? Narinig nyo na yung mga officers, no? So naroon na sila talagang commitment. And we would like to hear as well from Mark. Mark, do you have any insights on this?
Hello everyone. Mark here. First off, sorry if my audio is kind of weak. I'm currently outside, but just to give you some information, yeah, in terms of doing an assessment, it's normally you can summarize most assessment in like a three step process. First, where are we currently in our baseline? Next would be identifying the gaps and addressing the gaps. And third would be addressing if we're finally there, which is our goal or endpoint. Now, most of these assessment activities can be boiled down into a lack of information and a lack of commitment. So first off, let's detail about lack of commitment. I do think that most companies have a well-versed expertise in reliability and maintenance. So you just need to kind of pick the right person from the job from inside the company. Now, next is that would be the lack of information before it, because any action, contract, end goal, vision that you want to do, that would mean that you need information to do it proper, to do it right, and to reach that world class level. Now, here at AMRPP, we are a mix of various experts, practitioners from various industry sectors. And I believe that you will find someone here or among our members, or if not, we can refer you to someone who knows that information, such as how do we go about with an assessment, how do we go about with ISO 55K, and how do we go about getting that world-class maintenance reliability level. That's it from me. Back to you, Vince.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. So, you see that it really takes, us as practitioners from different background and industries to make it happen. Then eventually it will be available, AMRPP, no, from AMRPP to support it. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Hinerd, what are the major challenges that you have encountered during the reliability journey, and how did you overcome them?
Actually, I experienced challenge because currently our reliability is still ongoing. It's actually not yet complete. And we have some challenges that really provides us with a lot of headaches. One of these is the, as an example, is we want to come up with an operator care program. Now, the operator care program basically is you need your operations to take some of the minor maintenance work, be the first line of maintenance, be more active in actually ensuring that the condition of their machines are in top health at all times, and reporting some issues at the earliest stages, basically. So during the time that we present this, actually the main opposition is coming from our manufacturing ABPs. So meaning more from the operations itself. They're saying, why are you giving us maintenance roles? When in fact, it's not actually maintenance. It's very minor things that they need to do. Just so that they can actually, since they're there 24 hours a day, they're more in tune with what is actually developing in the equipment that they're using. Now, this is what I said at the beginning, that you have to get your executive sponsor to support you. So during this time when we presented, then we got this opposition from the operations heads themselves. And then this our sponsor then said, no, I want this done. You should do this. Okay. It's okay. But then, so what? He just said that, right? So what happens there is that he came up with his own way of getting it executed. So basically not the one that we recommended. And then, but some of the ideas that we have was basically put in place. Now, the issue there is, alam mo na yung the Filipino way of ningas kugon. right? So they were there, rah rah rah, in the beginning. They get all this information in place. They put up a communication board in the control room. Then they do daily marking of issues in the field. So basically, it was working for, I think, 2 months. Then when I came back to check, it suddenly stopped on the third month. Everything was already around a week old, and nothing new was being done. So I went to the sponsor, the executive sponsor. They told them, okay, it looks like operations is no longer doing our operator care program. And then you know what he said? He said this, oh, so it died a natural death. So basically, you can see there that there is really no commitment from the executive sponsor to support you. So that is really one of the major challenges that many of you may face in the future. So that's why I suggest that before embarking on such an initiative, you have really as executive sponsor that really knows the value of what is being presented, and making sure that he actually supports it. Otherwise, it will just be a one more failure story. So for now, we plan to again relaunch. So this time, I hope, because we have a new leadership, we hope to try again. And this time, I think we will do it the right way. First with the information, and then getting the commitment from the leadership.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you, Hiner. I think that's really comprehensive and really highlights the importance of the leadership, executive sponsorship. And I think in my insight na dapat yung mga reliability engineers also is equipped with change management strategies and skills, no? Para they
Yeah.
also know how to navigate the personalities, the political, the dynamics in these kinds of projects. So there's a follow-up question on chat from Edwin asking, is the operator care concept similar to autonomous maintenance from the TPM principle? And Billy added that in their company, they call operator care as BEC, or basic equipment care. And it is similar with AM from TPM pillar. So Hiner, what you said a while ago, yung operator care, is that in line with the TPM principle?
Yeah. Basically, it's the autonomous maintenance.
Autonomous maintenance.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So I know medyo nag-overtime tayo, but we would like to take this opportunity as well to thank Hiner and everyone. Can you please give Hiner a big round of applause for his insights, his sharing? Okay. And
Thank you.
yes, Mark, you would like to add something?
No. I thought it was the applause button.
Okay. All right. So if I may also would like to give my insights about because in these kinds of collaborations that we are doing, we have what we call volunteers, no? So we would like to request our practitioners to share your time and volunteer by sharing with us, your time, and be a volunteer to our committees. We have a membership programs committee, which like this kinds of webinars, ito yung mga members ng committee na to will try to formulate ano ba yung mga engaging activities, or initiatives that the members can benefit. So if you're interested, please send us an email at info@amrpp.org. Or if you are in the more of a more of the creative side and extrovert, and would like to get the name out there, we would like to invite you to be part of the marketing committee. So we have our social media pages, we have these kinds of our Viber groups that we can utilize to promote ano ba yung vision and mission ng ating association. So again, I'll put in the chat the email, which is info@amrpp.org. And also, if you have a case study or a learning session that you would like to share, that you think the practitioners can also learn from, you may submit your abstract on this link. Okay, so we can have this. And lastly, we have our first general membership meeting as a co-located event on the Erudites conference happening on October 5 to 7 at the Citadines Bay City, Manila. So just sharing with you this one.
Hi, Irene, no sound.
Sound, sir. Sorry, let me try this again. So on this note, we would just like to inform everyone that our first general membership meeting is happening together with the conference. Okay na ba, sir, yung sound?
Yes, okay.
The world is changing, and so is the way we manage our critical assets. The pandemic has forced us to embrace new ways of working and managing our assets remotely. But with change comes challenges. Asset performance management is vital for the success of any industrial organization. It's the key to ensuring the reliability, availability, and maintainability of your critical assets. It's about understanding how your assets perform, identifying potential risks, and implementing strategies to optimize their performance. But in today's digital age, it's not just about managing the assets, it's about managing the data, the technologies, and the people that keep them running. That's why it's more important than ever to stay up to date with the latest trends and best practices in asset performance management. And that's why we invite you to join us at the APM 4.0 Lead Conference and Exhibition, a premier event for industry leaders and experts to share best-in-class strategies in managing critical assets in the new normal. Register now.
Okay. So thank you. And that essentially is our webinar. I would like to invite everyone, if you can take a group photo. If you have your cameras with you, please turn them on so I can take a quick screenshot. And then we'll post that in our LinkedIn. No? Ganyan. Okay, si Ellie pala nagda-drive pa. Be safe, ha? Okay. Okay, si Al, Earl, and Clayton, if you have a camera, please. If not, it's okay. We can just go and take a screenshot now on 3. Okay, sige, Earl, understand. Okay. All right, on 3, 1, 2, hold it. Okay, please hold it. All right. Wait lang. All right. Thank you, everyone. I will put in here our photo. And then I would like to thank again Hener for your time and generous sharing of your experience and how a high reliability organizations reach the top. And that is what we want for all industries in the Philippines, to reach its high reliability status, because after all, we are all in this space, and we would like each and everyone to be more competitive. Para yung sinabi ni Hener kanina, yung magkano ba yan, sir? $80,000 annual income ng reliability engineer o na 100,000. Syempre, that comes with it the high reliability status ng industries, di ba? So when we reach that high reliability status, that would also go with the compensation of our practitioners. So, marami pong salamat sa inyong oras, and we invite you to our first general membership meeting. And please stay tuned on our next installment of our webinar series number 3. All right. So, everyone, maraming salamat, Sir Hener. Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, have a good week.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Mark, Jason, Hener, let's stay on the, ano lang. Sir Creighton, I'll remove you for the meantime, ha?